My wife branded me controlling for questioning a lavish Vegas trip with toxic friends. I saved every receipt, cut the cards, and filed divorce papers. She drops her phone on the table and announces she's going to Vegas for her birthday weekend with her girlfriends. She doesn't ask, she announces, like she's reading the weather forecast. That's exactly what happened to me last Tuesday evening. She stood there with this smug expression, waiting for my reaction. The same woman who used to ask my opinion about everything now couldn't care less what I thought about a 4-day Vegas trip with her most toxic friends. Vegas trip is happening whether you like it or not, she said, picking up her phone and scrolling through what looked like hotel bookings. My birthday, my choice. Don't even think about trying to talk me out of it. I set down my fork and looked at her carefully. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone who had been influenced by her new circle of friends, all recently divorced, all bitter, all constantly filling her head with ideas about living her best life and not letting any man control her. Which friends are going? I asked calmly. She rolled her eyes dramatically. The usual group. And before you start with your judgmental comments, they're successful women who know how to have fun. Successful, right? One was a yoga instructor who posted half-naked photos for attention. Another was between jobs and living off alimony. And the third one had just blown through her divorce settlement in 6 months. These were her role models now. How much is this going to cost? I asked, keeping my voice level. That's not your concern anymore, she snapped. I make my own money. I can spend it however I want. Except she conveniently forgot that we had joint accounts, joint credit cards, and joint financial responsibilities. Her own money was as much mine as it was hers. And lately, she'd been spending it like there was no tomorrow. We agreed to discuss major expenses, I reminded her. She laughed, actually laughed. Major expenses? It's a birthday trip, not buying a car. Stop being so controlling. Controlling. There it was, the word her friends had been feeding her for months. Apparently, wanting to be consulted on financial decisions in my own marriage made me controlling. Wanting my wife to spend time with people who didn't actively hate men made me controlling. I'm not being controlling, I said. I'm being responsible. We have a mortgage, car payments, and you just bought a whole new wardrobe last month. Whatever, she said, waving her hand dismissively. I'm going. End of discussion. The girls and I are going to have the time of our lives, and there's nothing you can do about it. She turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back with this satisfied smirk. Oh, and don't wait up. We might extend the trip if we're having too much fun. That's when I realized this wasn't about a birthday celebration. This was about power. This was her way of testing how far she could push me, how much disrespect I would tolerate. She wanted to see if I would beg, plead, or throw a tantrum like some insecure husband. But here's what she didn't understand about me. I don't beg. I don't plead. And I definitely don't throw tantrums. When someone shows me who they really are, I believe them. And when someone decides they don't need to respect me or our marriage, I take notes. Over the next few days, she ramped up the attitude, constantly on the phone with her friends, giggling about their Vegas plans, talking loud enough for me to hear about finally being free, not having to answer to anyone. She booked the most expensive suite at some luxury hotel, made dinner reservations at restaurants that cost more than most people's rent, and scheduled spa treatments that would feed a family for a week, all on our joint credit card. Naturally, when I tried to bring up the budget one more time, she cut me off with pure venom in her voice. I don't care what you think about my friends, and I don't care what you think about this trip. I'm celebrating my birthday with them in Vegas, and that's final. Those words hung in the air like a challenge. She'd drawn her line in the sand, made her position crystal clear. She didn't care what I thought about anything. Our marriage had become a dictatorship, and she was the dictator. Fine. If she didn't care what I thought, then she was about to learn that I didn't need her permission to take action either. If she wanted to play games with our marriage and our finances, then game on. While she was busy planning her rebellion disguised as a birthday trip, I was planning something else entirely. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about not controlling her. Instead, she was about to learn a lesson about consequences. The day before her departure, she packed her bags with the enthusiasm of someone escaping prison. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, jewelry I'd bought her for previous birthdays. She was taking everything valuable on this trip to show off to her toxic friends. Make sure you miss me while I'm gone, she said sarcastically as she loaded her suitcase into her car. Oh, I will, I replied with a smile. I definitely will. She had no idea how true those words were about to become. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I walked back into the house and did something I should have done months ago. I pulled out every bank statement, credit card bill, and financial document we had. What I found made my blood run cold. In the past 3 months alone, she had spent over $8,000 on what she called self-care and personal development. Spa treatments, shopping sprees, expensive dinners with her friends, online courses that she never finished, gym memberships she never used. The list went on and on. But that wasn't even the worst part. She had opened 2 new credit cards without telling me. 2 cards that were maxed out with purchases I knew nothing about. Designer handbags, jewelry, expensive skincare products, and countless online shopping binges. My wife, the woman who used to clip coupons and compare prices at the grocery store, had turned into a financial disaster, and I had been too busy trusting her to notice. While I was going through the financial carnage, my phone started buzzing with notifications. She had already started posting on social media from the airport, showing off her first-class ticket and champagne. First class on a 4-hour flight because apparently Coach wasn't good enough for her new lifestyle. By that evening, her social media was a parade of excess. Pictures of their suite at the Bellagio, bottles of champagne that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, and dinner at some celebrity chef restaurant where a single meal cost what we usually spent on food for a week. Then came the real gut punch. A video of her at some exclusive nightclub, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, dancing with some random guy while her friends cheered her on. The caption read, "Finally free to be myself." I screenshotted everything, every post, every story, every tag from her friends. Documentation would be important later. But the real revelation came the next morning when my neighbor knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable, like he was delivering bad news he didn't want to share. "Look, I don't usually get involved in other people's business," he said, "but I thought you should know. My brother works at the bank downtown, and he mentioned seeing your wife there last week. She was asking about separating accounts and transferring funds." My stomach dropped. She hadn't just planned this Vegas trip. She had planned to financially sabotage our marriage. While I was working and paying bills, she was plotting her exit strategy. I thanked him and immediately called the bank. Sure enough, she had attempted to transfer money from our joint savings into her personal account. The only reason it hadn't gone through was because the amount required both signatures for transfers over $5,000. She had tried to steal half our savings to fund her Vegas adventure and whatever came after. That afternoon, I got a call from a friend who worked in the hotel industry. He'd seen her posts and wanted to give me a heads up about something he'd noticed. The hotel she's staying at, the suite she booked, that's $1,200 a night for 4 nights. And the restaurants she's been posting about, those aren't just expensive, they're the kind of places people go to show off. She's not just spending money, she's burning through it to make a statement. A statement. That's exactly what this was. A statement that our marriage meant nothing to her, that our financial stability was less important than her image on social media, and that my opinions and concerns were worthless. By the second day of her trip, the social media posts became even more outrageous: private cabana rentals at exclusive pool parties, shopping sprees at designer stores and the forum shops, gambling photos with stacks of chips. Each post was more extravagant than the last. But the comments from her friends were what really got to me, encouraging her to live her truth, telling her she deserved this, and making snide remarks about finally being free from negative energy. They were treating this like she was escaping from an abusive situation instead of disrespecting her marriage. That's when I started making phone calls of my own. First to our accountant, then to a lawyer, and finally to the credit card companies. If she wanted to play financial games, I needed to understand exactly what kind of damage she could do and what options I had to protect myself. The lawyer was particularly helpful. He explained that her reckless spending could be considered dissipation of marital assets, and that her attempts to hide financial information and transfer money without my knowledge were serious red flags in any potential divorce proceedings. Document everything, he advised. Every purchase, every social media post, every attempt to hide financial decisions. This behavior shows a pattern of financial irresponsibility and deception. On the 3rd day, she finally called me, not to check in, not to apologize, but to complain that one of her credit cards had been declined at some expensive jewelry store. "Can you call the credit card company and increase the limit?" she asked casually, like she was asking me to pick up milk from the store. "Which card?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The Chase card." I'm trying to buy something nice for myself, and it's embarrassing that it got declined in front of my friends. Embarrassing. She was worried about being embarrassed in front of the same friends who were encouraging her to destroy our marriage while I was at home discovering the financial chaos she'd created. How much have you spent so far? I asked. That's not important. Just fix the card limit. Actually, it is important. We agreed on a budget for this trip. She laughed. That same dismissive laugh I'd heard before she left. Budget? I'm not some teenager with an allowance. I'm an adult woman celebrating her birthday. With our money, I corrected. My money, she said. I work, I earn, I spend. End of story. That's when I knew for certain that this marriage was over. Not because of the spending, not because of the trip, but because she had fundamentally lost respect for me and for our partnership. In her mind, she was single. I was just some roommate she hadn't gotten rid of yet. Enjoy the rest of your trip, I said calmly. That's it? You're not going to fix the card? No, I'm not. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, I got a series of angry text messages calling me controlling, petty, and worse. Her friends had clearly coached her on what to say because the language was identical to the toxic advice I'd been seeing in her group chats. But here's what she didn't realize. Every angry text, every social media post, every financial decision she made was building my case. She was documenting her own disrespect and irresponsibility better than I ever could. While she was busy posting videos of herself spending our money in Vegas, I was busy preparing for her return. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about accepting her independence. Instead, she was about to learn that independence comes with consequences and disrespect comes with a price tag she couldn't afford. The final post from her trip showed her and her friends toasting with expensive champagne with the caption, "Best birthday ever." Some people are worth keeping, others are just holding you back. Perfect. She had just publicly announced that she considered me dead weight in her life. That post would look great in divorce court. While she was living it up in Vegas, treating our marriage like a joke, I was busy turning into someone she clearly didn't know at all. The man she left behind wasn't the same man who would be waiting for her return. First stop, the law office. I walked into that conference room with a folder full of evidence that would make any divorce attorney smile. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of her social media posts, and documentation of her attempts to hide financial transactions. This is one of the clearest cases of financial misconduct I've seen in years, the lawyer said, after reviewing everything. She's created a paper trail that basically argues your case for you. We spent 2 hours going over my options: separation of assets, protection of joint accounts, and what he called strategic positioning for potential divorce proceedings. The beauty of it was that everything we discussed was perfectly legal and completely justified given her behavior. The key here, he explained, is that she's demonstrated a pattern of deception and financial irresponsibility. Courts don't look kindly on spouses who try to hide assets or make major financial decisions without consulting their partner. By the time I left his office, I had a clear action plan and the phone number of a financial advisor who specialized in asset protection during marital disputes. Next, I drove to our bank. The conversation with the branch manager was enlightening. Apparently, she had been in there multiple times over the past month asking about account procedures, transfer limits, and how to set up automatic payments from our joint savings to her personal checking. I probably shouldn't tell you this, the manager said quietly. But she seemed very interested in how quickly she could move large amounts of money without requiring your signature. That confirmed what I already suspected. This Vegas trip wasn't just about her birthday or proving a point about independence. It was a test run for something much bigger. She was planning her escape, and she intended to take as much of our money with her as possible. I spent the rest of that day reorganizing our entire financial structure. I opened new accounts in my name only, documented every shared asset we owned, and created a detailed inventory of all our joint possessions. If she wanted to play financial games, I was going to make sure I knew exactly what was at stake. The financial advisor was brutally honest about my situation. Your wife has put you in a vulnerable position, she said. But the good news is that her behavior has been so reckless and well documented that protecting your interests should be straightforward. We set up a strategy that would safeguard my credit, protect my assets, and ensure that her spending spree couldn't damage my financial future. It felt strange taking these steps, but her behavior had forced my hand. Meanwhile, her social media posts were getting more and more outrageous. Day 3 brought photos of a shopping spree that must have cost thousands of dollars, Designer bags, expensive shoes, jewelry, and clothes that she would probably wear once before they ended up forgotten in her closet. But the real kicker was a video she posted of herself at some high-end spa getting a treatment that cost more than most people's car payments. The caption read, "Treating myself like the queen I am. Life is too short to settle for less than you deserve." Queen. She was calling herself a queen while spending our money like it was Monopoly cash and publicly humiliating our marriage on social media. That evening, I got a call from her sister. She'd been watching the social media posts too, and she was concerned. "This isn't like her," she said. "I mean, she's always enjoyed nice things, but this is excessive. And those friends of hers are trouble. They've been divorced 3 times between them, and they seem to enjoy encouraging other women to blow up their marriages." "I'm aware," I told her. "What are you going to do when she gets back?" "Whatever needs to be done." There was a long pause. "She's making a huge mistake. You're a good husband, and she's throwing it away for what? A few days of showing off in Vegas." But here's the thing I was starting to understand. This wasn't really about Vegas. This was about respect. She had decided that I didn't deserve to be consulted about major decisions in our marriage. She had decided that our financial stability was less important than her image. And she had decided that my feelings and concerns were irrelevant to her happiness. Those weren't the decisions of someone who wanted to save their marriage. Those were the decisions of someone who had already checked out emotionally and was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. On the 4th day of her trip, I made the call I'd been considering since day 1. I contacted the credit card companies and requested that the limits on our joint cards be reduced to prevent further damage. It was a temporary measure, but it would stop her from continuing to rack up debt while she was in Vegas. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with angry messages. Apparently, one of her cards had been declined again, this time at some expensive restaurant where she was trying to impress her friends with her generosity. "What did you do?" she demanded in a voice message that was pure rage. "I'm humiliated. My card got declined in front of everyone." Good. Maybe a little humiliation would help her understand how I felt watching her destroy our marriage on social media while spending our money like a lottery winner. "Fix this right now, or there will be consequences when I get home," she threatened in another message. Consequences. She was threatening me with consequences for protecting our financial future from her reckless spending. The irony was almost funny. I didn't respond to her messages. Instead, I used that time to visit our insurance agent, our mortgage company, and our joint investment accounts. If she was planning to leave this marriage, I was going to make sure she couldn't take me down with her. That night, she called me directly. Her voice was different this time, less angry and more manipulative. "Baby, I don't know what's wrong with our cards, but it's really embarrassing. Can you please just call them and fix whatever the problem is? I promise I'll be more careful with spending when I get home." Baby. She was calling me baby now, using the sweet voice she used to use when she wanted something. But her promises meant nothing anymore. She'd already shown me who she really was. "The cards are fine," I told her. "The limits are just lower now." "Lower? Why would you lower them without asking me?" "The same reason you booked this trip without asking me." Sometimes you have to make unilateral decisions to protect yourself. The silence on the other end was telling. She was finally starting to realize that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. "When I get home, we're going to have a serious conversation," she said, her voice returning to that threatening tone. Yes, I agreed. We definitely are. But what she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of her. While she was busy posting photos and spending money, I had been busy preparing for the conversation that would end our marriage. She thought she was coming home to the same man she'd left behind. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. Her flight was scheduled to land at 3:47 p.m. on Sunday. I knew this because I'd been tracking her itinerary, not out of concern for her safety, but because I needed to time everything perfectly. At 8 a.m. that morning, I made the calls I'd been preparing for all week. First to the bank, then to each credit card company, and finally to our joint investment account. By 10 a.m., she had been removed as an authorized user from every account that I had the legal right to control. The joint accounts remained accessible to both of us, but I transferred my portion of our savings into a separate account to prevent any surprise withdrawals. Everything I was doing was completely legal and well within my rights as a married individual protecting his assets. At noon, I received confirmation that all changes had been processed. She would discover this when she tried to use our cards for her return trip expenses. Parking fees, Uber rides, airport meals, her usual post-vacation shopping to ease the disappointment of coming home. All of it would be declined. I sat in my home office, looking at the printed copies of every social media post she'd made during her trip. 4 days of publicly humiliating our marriage while burning through thousands of dollars. 4 days of treating me like an irrelevant obstacle to her happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Landed. Getting Uber home. Can't wait to sleep in my own bed. Her own bed. Interesting choice of words. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen, but this time I didn't hesitate to answer. "What's wrong with my cards?" she demanded, skipping any pleasantries. "None of them are working, and I'm stuck at the airport." "They're working fine," I replied calmly. "You're just no longer authorized to use them." "What do you mean I'm not authorized? These are my cards too. Actually, most of them were in my name with you as an authorized user. I simply removed that authorization." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking with rage. "You can't do this. You can't just strand me at the airport." "I'm not stranding you anywhere. You have access to your personal account and the funds you've earned yourself. Use your independence. My personal account has like $300 in it." "That's not enough to get home." "Then maybe you shouldn't have spent $8,000 in 4 days showing off for your friends." Another long silence. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head as she tried to process what was happening. "This is financial abuse," she finally screamed. "You're trying to control me. I'm protecting myself from someone who tried to steal half our savings and has been spending recklessly for months." "There's a difference. I wasn't stealing anything. That money belongs to both of us." "You're absolutely right. Which is why transferring it without consulting me was attempted theft, just like spending thousands of dollars without discussing it was financial betrayal." I could hear airport announcements in the background and knew she was starting to panic. Good. Panic might help her understand the gravity of what she'd done to our marriage. "Please," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "Just fix the card so I can get home and we'll talk about this. We'll talk when you get here. Figure out your own way home." I hung up. 20 minutes later she called back, crying this time. "I called an Uber, but it's going to cost almost $200 to get home. That's most of the money I have left." "Sounds like a consequence of your Vegas spending spree. Why are you being so cruel?" "I just wanted to celebrate my birthday," she sobbed. "By publicly humiliating our marriage and spending money like we're millionaires? That's not celebrating. That's sabotage." She tried several more tactics during that conversation. Tears, anger, guilt trips, promises to change, even threats about what her friends would think about how I was treating her. None of it worked because I had finally seen her for who she really was. An hour later, I got a call from one of her friends. Apparently, she had contacted them for help getting home from the airport. "You need to fix whatever's wrong with her cards," the friend demanded. "She's stuck at the airport crying." "She's not stuck," I replied. "She has money in her personal account. She just doesn't want to spend her own money after blowing through ours all week. You're being controlling and abusive. I'm being responsible, something she forgot how to be." I hung up on her too. By evening, she had finally made it home, looking exhausted and defeated. She walked through the front door with her expensive luggage and immediately launched into a tirade about how embarrassing it had been to have her cards declined and how her friends thought I was a controlling monster. "Good," I said. "Let them think whatever they want. Their opinions stopped mattering to me the moment they started encouraging you to destroy our marriage." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. The man who used to listen patiently to her complaints, who used to apologize for things that weren't his fault, who used to beg for her attention and approval. That man was gone. "We need to talk," she said, setting down her bags. "Yes, we do. But first, you need to understand something. The cards aren't broken. You're not authorized to use them anymore because I can't trust you with our financial security. You can't just cut me off from our money." "I didn't cut you off from anything. The joint accounts are still accessible to both of us. You just can't rack up credit card debt or transfer money without my knowledge anymore." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something, probably trying to access our bank accounts to see what else had changed. "This is insane," she muttered. "You're treating me like a criminal. You tried to transfer $5,000 from our savings without telling me. You opened credit cards behind my back. You spent $8,000 in 4 days while posting about how I was holding you back. What would you call that behavior?" For the first time since she'd walked through the door, she had no immediate response. The evidence was overwhelming, and we both knew it. "I want a divorce," she finally said, like it was some kind of threat. I nodded calmly. "I figured you would. I've already spoken to a lawyer." The look of shock on her face was priceless. She had expected me to panic, to beg her to reconsider, to promise I'd change. Instead, I was ahead of her on this too. "You've already spoken to a lawyer?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 days ago. Right after you posted that video calling yourself a queen and talking about how some people are just holding you back. She realized then that every social media post, every purchase, every public humiliation of our marriage had been documented and cataloged. Her Vegas trip hadn't been a celebration of her independence. It had been a comprehensive demonstration of why our marriage was over. The woman who had left for Vegas, thinking she was teaching me a lesson about respecting her independence, was about to learn that independence works both ways, and consequences have a way of coming home to roost. She spent the next hour trying every manipulation tactic in the book. First came the tears, then the anger, followed by bargaining, and finally threats. It was like watching someone cycle through the stages of grief, except she was grieving the loss of her financial control over me. "You can't just decide to divorce me because I went on a trip with my friends," she said, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "This isn't about a trip. This is about respect, trust, and financial responsibility, 3 things you've completely abandoned." She stopped pacing and turned to face me with that defiant look I'd grown tired of seeing. "My friends were right about you. You are controlling. A real man would support his wife's independence. A real wife would discuss major financial decisions with her husband, instead of trying to steal money and max out credit cards behind his back. I wasn't stealing. That money is half mine." I walked over to my desk and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements, credit card bills, documentation of her secret accounts, screenshots of every social media post from Vegas. "Let's talk about what's really yours," I said, spreading the papers across the coffee table. "In the past 6 months, you've spent over $15,000 on what you call self-care and personal development. Meanwhile, I've been covering the mortgage, utilities, car payments, and insurance." Her face went pale as she looked at the evidence laid out in front of her. "You've been tracking my spending. I've been trying to understand why our joint accounts kept getting drained while you complained that we never had money for anything important." She picked up one of the credit card statements and stared at it like she was seeing it for the first time. "Some of these purchases were for both of us," she said weakly. "Really? Which ones? The $500 spa day with your girlfriends? The designer handbags you hide in your closet? The gym membership you've used exactly 3 times? Each question hit her like a physical blow. She had no defense because there was no defense. The numbers didn't lie, and we both knew it. "Fine," she said, throwing the statement back on the table. "Maybe I spent more than I should have. But that doesn't give you the right to cut off my access to our accounts. Actually, it does. Especially when you tried to transfer money without my knowledge and open credit cards behind my back." She sat down heavily on the couch, finally understanding that her reckless behavior had consequences she hadn't anticipated. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing. That's the point. I don't want anything from you anymore. You've made it clear that my opinion doesn't matter, our marriage doesn't matter, and our financial stability doesn't matter. So now you get to be as independent as you want. You're just going to throw away our marriage because of money?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not throwing away anything. You already did that when you decided to publicly humiliate our relationship while spending us into debt. You threw it away when you tried to steal from our savings. You threw it away when you told me you didn't care what I thought about your decisions." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence of her financial betrayal scattered across the table. "My friend said you would try to financially abuse me if I stood up for myself," she said finally. "Your friends? Let's talk about them for a minute." I pulled out my phone and started reading from the screenshots I'd saved. "Here's what your friend posted 3 days ago. Men are intimidated by successful women who know their worth." Here's another one. "The right man will support your dreams without asking questions. And my personal favorite, if he's worried about money, he's not the one." She shifted uncomfortably as I read each toxic piece of advice her friends had been feeding her. "These women have been divorced a combined total of 7 times. 7. And they've been encouraging you to destroy your marriage so you can join their bitter singles club. They were trying to help me find my independence. They were trying to drag you down to their level of misery. And it worked." She started crying again, but this time it felt different. Less manipulative, more genuine, like she was finally seeing the situation clearly for the first time. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad," she whispered. "But they did get this bad. And the worst part is that you kept making it worse even after I tried to talk to you about it." So what happens now? Now you learn what real independence looks like. You get to pay your own bills, make your own financial decisions, and deal with the consequences of your choices without me there to bail you out. She looked up at me with genuine fear in her eyes. "You're really going to divorce me? You already divorced me. You just didn't file the paperwork yet." "Please," she said, reaching for my hand. "We can fix this. I'll cut up the credit cards. I'll stop hanging out with those friends. I'll do whatever you want." I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. "It's too late for that. You can't unspend the money. You can't take back the public humiliation. And you can't rebuild trust that's been completely destroyed. What about counseling? What about giving me another chance?" "I gave you chances. Every time I tried to discuss our finances, every time I expressed concern about your spending, every time I asked you to consider how your decisions affected our marriage, you ignored every single opportunity to change course." She sat there crying, finally understanding that her actions had consequences she couldn't manipulate her way out of. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "That's not my problem anymore. You're an independent woman, remember? Figure it out. You're really going to make me homeless?" "I'm not making you anything. Your choices led you here. Deal with them." She tried a few more tactics over the next hour, promising to change, threatening to expose me on social media, even trying to seduce me. Nothing worked because I had finally seen her true character, and there was no going back from that revelation. "The lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings," I told her, as she gathered her things. "This isn't over," she said, her voice returning to that familiar threatening tone. "Yes, it is. And tomorrow you're going to realize just how over it really is." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. 20 minutes later, I watched through the window as she loaded her car with the expensive luggage from her Vegas trip. She was probably going to stay with one of her toxic friends, the same ones who had encouraged her to destroy her marriage. Perfect. They could all be miserable together. 3 weeks later, she was standing on my sidewalk crying and begging for forgiveness. But by then, the legal machinery was already in motion, and there was no stopping it. The divorce papers had been served to her at her friend's apartment, along with a detailed financial accounting that her lawyer probably told her was a nightmare. Every hidden purchase, every secret credit card, every attempt to transfer money without authorization was documented and presented as evidence of financial misconduct. "Please," she sobbed from the sidewalk. "I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this." I looked at her through the window. The woman who had once called herself a queen was now facing the reality of her independence. Her toxic friends had gotten tired of supporting her after 2 weeks. The credit cards she'd maxed out were demanding payment, and the lawyer had explained exactly how bad her situation really was. "The papers are already filed," I called through the door. "My lawyer says you've been served." "I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford anything. Please just talk to me." That's when I opened the door, not out of sympathy, but to deliver the final message she needed to hear. "You wanted independence. You got it. You wanted to make unilateral decisions without considering your spouse. Congratulations. You're single now, but I love you. You love my financial stability. There's a difference." She tried to push past me into the house, but I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "The court date is set for next month," I told her calmly. "My lawyer has all the documentation of your financial misconduct, the hidden credit cards, the attempted money transfers, the reckless spending, all of it." Her face went white. "What does that mean?" "It means you're going to be held responsible for the debt you created. It means the judge is going to see exactly who initiated the breakdown of this marriage. And it means your Vegas celebration is going to cost you a lot more than you bargained for." She collapsed onto the sidewalk, finally understanding that her actions had consequences she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I was so wrong about everything." "Yes, you were. But being wrong doesn't undo the damage." 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. She was ordered to pay back the money she'd stolen from our joint accounts, responsible for all the debt she'd accumulated on her secret credit cards, and required to compensate me for my legal fees. Her friends, the same ones who had encouraged her to live her truth, were nowhere to be found when she needed help dealing with the financial consequences of their advice. I kept the house, the stable income, and my self-respect, She got her independence along with a mountain of debt, and a harsh lesson about what happens when you mistake your spouse's patience for weakness. Sometimes I see her social media posts now. No more luxury hotels or expensive restaurants. No more calling herself a queen or talking about people holding her back. Just a woman working 2 jobs to pay off the debt from her 4-day independence celebration in Vegas. The last time she drove by the house, she slowed down and stared at the life she'd thrown away for a weekend of showing off to women who didn't even like her enough to help when things got tough. Independence, it turns out, is expensive, and some lessons can only be learned the hard way.